Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the introduction to the Zohar by the Bal Hasulam Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag of blessed memory. This is one of the most fundamental works of all of Kabbalah. This paints a beautiful picture of not only the philosophical worldview and understanding of Kabbalah and Judaism through the lens of this wisdom of truth, but it also provides us technical aspects as well, learning about spiritual worlds, different levels and aspects of the ego, the sphirot on the tree of life, and eventually leading to also the holographic nature of reality and how we have the principles of as above, so below, as below, so above. This is one of my favorite texts. I have read it many times over, and it's an honor and a pleasure to teach it, as I hope to be a kosher and aligned continuation of the Bala Sulam's teachings. The very least, I can do my best to provide introductions for you guys, as I hope I'm going to be doing and continuously providing here and beyond. If you haven't already, I highly recommend also learning from the Matan Torah series that we've done some time ago. That is also by the Bal HaSulam. The English translation for that is Giving, the Essential Teachings of the Kabbalah by Aryeh Siegel, PhD. The book that I would recommend getting for this book is A Tapestry for the Soul by Yedida Cohen, or compiled and translated by Yedida. She's been a long time student and masterful translator of Rabbi Ashlag's works. And she's been a student of Rabbi Avraham Mordechai Gottlieb Shlita for a long time, who is my Rebbe. Rabbi Gottlieb is the student and successor in terms of the Hasidic tradition to Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag of blessed memory, who is the first son and successor in regards to the Hasidic dynasty of Ashlag to the Bal HaSulam. Rabbi Ashlag himself, the author of the Sulam, the ultimate commentary on the Zohar, translating the entirety of it from Aramaic into English. Sorry, not English, Hebrew. But Yedida here has done an amazing job by translating into English in a very wondrous way. I won't be reading from that book, actually, in respect to her. If those who want to learn from her, she has given this course and this teaching from this book itself. And I recommend to at least check her out, nahorapress.com, and see her other publications. Highly recommend all the books she has to offer, and I'm sure her courses are amazing. The translation I will be reading from is on Sefaria.org, which, if you're not familiar with already, is an amazing resource for all things Torah. All aspects. I'm saying the Torah itself, the books of the prophets, the Mishnayot, the Talmud, Kabbalah, Chassidut, everything. It has amazing translations all across the board, and they're getting better by the day. They have a lot of stuff and continuously adding matters from the Bala Sulam as well. But we are going to be reading it from Sefaria. It seems here that this translation is from Dr. Yoel Finkelman, publication in 2024, a very recent one. It's called The True Wisdom. Amazing. So let us set an intention, because intention is so, so important. May we set the intention that from this learning we will draw upon ourselves the lights of the infinite into our minds and into our hearts. Because we're not learning just as an intellectual pursuit. We're learning for the sake of transformation. The Torah is supposed to bring us to a change, and the light within it can create such a reality of change. So may we merit to draw the lights of goodness, the lights of emunah, belief consciousness into our being, so that we can continue to rise from level to level and be more giving, loving, compassionate, and so forth, as a prize, as a reward for the learning itself. Amazing. So with our intention set, let us begin. Bala Sulam starts. Questions and inquiries. In this introduction to Kabbalah, I would like to clarify certain ideas that might seem simple, People mention ideas, and much ink has been spilled explaining those ideas, but people do not clearly and properly understand them. What is going on here? As mentioned in the Baal Sulam's Matan Torah, the time to reveal the Kabbalah had come maximally, primarily from an intention to fan the flame, to calm the flame, so to speak, of the nonsense that was being published even 100 years ago, let alone today, in the name of this true wisdom. There have been dark authors who have purported this beautiful pearl. If I had to say a name, for example, the likes of Aleister Crowley, who took the wisdoms and beautiful mysticisms rooted in the service of God and created God knows what with it. We are what we eat, and we consume wisdom as well. So we must ensure that we are drinking from pure and living waters. And so Baal Sulam understanding that the time had come, et la'asot in Hebrew. Time is now, the time had come to reveal the matters maximally, because they were going to be revealed anyway, and they were revealed anyway, and they're only revealing more in this digital age. So how much more important it is for teachers like Rabbi Gottlieb, and I hope myself and so forth, to share it in a grounded and kosher way, because there's still, to this day, a lot of nonsense out there, unfortunately. So in this introductory paragraph, Baal Sulam is referencing the philosophical inquiries to which much ink has been spilled, as he said, and we'll get into it shortly. So a large majority of the material brought in this series will be from what I have heard and learned in my time with the Rebbe Shlita, who I'm referring to as the Rebbe Shlita, Rebbe Avraham Mordechai Gottlieb, as well as other mentors and teachers that I have gained from, whether it's Rav Nachum and Rav Shmuel, different individuals in my community or extended community, as well as mentors like Rav Daniel Katz in regards to getting into the experiential, meditative, and embodied place, to not just take this learning into the intellectual, but also bring it into the heart, God willing. As a quick rundown, Rabbi Gottlieb was with Rabbi Baruch Shalom for 14 years, day and night. Hardly left his side. And we have the continuation of the community here in Israel. So, again, I'm honored and pleased to be sharing this with you. So Baal Sulam continues. He says, what is our human essence? What is our essence? But what is the human essence? Because we are human, after all. Essence in Hebrew is mahut, coming from the language of mahu. Mahu literally translates to what is he, or what is this? Meaning, what is man? What is our essence? Man is a soul and a body. The human being is both of them together. So what is a soul? What is a body? Those are the questions. And we'll get a lot of clarity as we continue, because Kabbalah is written in the language of root and branch. I would say more accurately, the Torah and all of its branches are written in root and branch, meaning they're written in the language of the branches, but they actually have a different meaning at their deepest root. Meaning to say, the word milk, for example, is a hint to the lights of loving kindness. And the word meat or flesh, basar, is a hint to the lights of wisdom. And they understood the coded language because they had received the tradition from master to student. But aside from that, whether it was prophetically or whether it was at such a high level of consciousness that they were able to receive such downloads, in any case, we have such an understanding of the roots to these branches. I say this because there are many code words for the soul, and also many code words for the body being the receiving aspect of the soul. Body, guf in Hebrew, is often mentioned throughout plenty of scripture or the words of the sages throughout the Talmud itself, let alone the Zohar, and it is to be understood as something within, not necessarily or literally just the flesh as we know it. I'd like to digress for a moment as well. I think it's worthy, since we're learning the introduction to the Zohar, to share a little bit about the Zohar for those that don't know. The Zohar is arguably the fundamental work in the Kabbalah. And we believe traditionally, as Torah Jews, that it was written and hidden by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was a great Tana of the Talmudic era. This was around 2,000 years ago or so. Bala Sulam says in one of his essays, even if Rabbi Shimon didn't write it, because academics and scholars, based on their findings, think that it was Rabbi Moshe de Leon of Spain who actually revealed it in the, I believe, 13th century. And he said, even if that was the case, it matters not, because the wisdom within the book is so magnanimous that he wouldn't be surprised if it was found out that Moses himself wrote the Zohar. So it doesn't matter. The potency, the power, the transformative nature, the healing condiment that is the Zohar is the same Zohar, whether it was written 700 years ago or 2,000 years ago. The Zohar is the deepest interpretation, the literal secrets of the Torah. It goes through all of the parshiot of the Chumash, 5 books of Moses, and paints and reveals particular episodes, the dynamics of characters, whether it's Jacob or Esav and so forth, and particularly the commentary of the Sulam by Rav Ashlag invites us to consider how to interpret it within ourselves. And that it's not just a story that happened, rather, it's all a model of consciousness that is also happening right here, right now. It is said that the Zohar was written for the last generations, which is us. It was written for you and I. But before we can really pierce and understand and appreciate the Zohar at deeper levels, aside from great teachers who are able to bring it down into practical levels, Reb Joey Rosenfeld, for example, is someone that I love to learn from and has wonderful Zohar classes that he teaches week to week based on the Parsha of the week and brings it down to a very practical psychological understanding. The point is that there's no skipping steps. Here we are learning the introduction. There's levels 0, there's 0.1, 0.2, and so forth. Here we are. Let us continue. Bala Sulam so far has asked, what is our human essence? The second question is, what is our role in this great chain of being, of which each and every one of us is but a small link in a chain? What this means to us is that each and every one of us has a specific purpose. We all have a mission in this world, and if you are not fulfilling it, you are leaving something out of the world. The world is missing something. There is not a completion, a perfection, a true light in the world because of that lack. And each and every one of us must know our unique role, must discover it, must ask for the strength and pray that it be revealed to us. And not only in of myself, meaning what is my personal shlichut, my mission, my goal, my purpose, my expression of self, but also how it relates to the unique moment in time in this chain and how it relates to the collective as well. Not just the collective now, but all of human history. So as Yedida Cohen, right, the master translator in Tapestry for the Soul, invites us to consider that there are 2 aspects to this question. One is, what is this long chain of reality? And 2, how are we links in it? So here's a excerpt from the book Tapestry for the Soul itself. A very powerful excerpt from the book Hakdama Lapanim Meirot Umasbirot, the introduction to the illuminating faces and revelations, which is one of the Baal Sulam's earlier works. As a preface to the actual section, Yedida says, to understand the following excerpt from Hakdama Lapanim Meirut Umasbirot, we need to know the receiving for oneself alone separates us from the Creator. This type of receiving originates from the very beginning of creation at the stage known as the Tzimtzum. Concerning this, we shall learn subsequently. And now we're getting into the excerpt. From this you may understand the severity of the consequence that followed the eating of the tree of knowledge, wherein all human beings became destined for mortality. This is the death resulting from the eating of which God forewarned Adam, quote, "On the day that you eat from it, you will surely die." The matter is, there was drawn into Adam and Eve's limbs a huge form of receiving for oneself alone. This form of receiving came from the halal panui, the empty space, which is the primal vessel of receiving. He's going to clarify these aspects more so. Bear with us. This halal panui is the uncorrected vessel. It receives for itself alone. That came into being following the tzimtzum, this original contraction, the initial event in the evolution, the cascading in the spiritual world. Subsequent to the tzimtzum, the highest light cannot abide together with such a vessel. Therefore, the eternal soul, which is described explicitly in the scripture as, quote, "And God blew into his nostrils the soul of life," had to leave Adam. Thus, the life of the human being became temporal, dependent on a piece of bread. What he's hinting to here is the shattering of the vessels. When there's too much light into a vessel, we crash. When someone who's not ready to receive a winning lottery ticket and is suddenly worth 9 figures, they crash, unfortunately so. They spend it all or get depressed very quick, and things just don't go well, unfortunately. When you try to put an ocean into a glass, a literal glass that can hold water, it'll be lost. It can't fit it. Might even break from the force of the waves of the tsunami, for example. Or someone who, God forbid, is addicted to hard drugs. It's a great pleasure, such a wondrous light, and shatters the person again and again. Both the negative voice within, the lack of control, the lack of power, the loss of free will, and the like. So this light from this eating, from this fruit of the tree of knowledge, was akin to the infinite light. And the vessel of Adam, even though he was a wondrously high spiritual being, was not fitted to receive this download, so to speak. He continues, the Bala Sulam that is in the excerpt. This life is not eternal life. Unlike Adam's former life, that was intended to be in the form of one soul, human life became, in comparison, like little sweat drops of life. That is to say, Adam's former life split into myriad droplets, such that every single drop is one part of his former life. Thus comes about the matter of the sparks of souls that are shared out amongst the generations of the entire human community. All the generations of the human community until the last generation, which completes the purpose of creation, form an array of one great chain. In this way, the work of God, may the one be blessed, is not changed at all by the sin of the tree of knowledge, but that light of life that existed in its entirety in the first human is now drawn out to form a great continuous chain. If it wasn't for that first or initial mistake, which he explains in this work that was an inside job. Obviously, the creator wanted the fall to happen so that the great chain of human history would unveil, giving each and every one of us as individuals the opportunity to do the inner work through the Torah and the mitzvot, through the refinement process and the elevation process of expanding our consciousness to become givers and compassionate beings of love like the creator. It would not have been possible if it wasn't for the fall. He ends the excerpt here. This great chain revolves unceasingly on the wheel of myriad forms until the end of the tikkun, the end of the rectification or correction process of creation, because the works of God are, of necessity, living and enduring. and we go up in holiness and not down. Understand this very well. Wow, it's amazing. He's saying we only go up in holiness. What seems to be crashes, what seems to be falls, what seems to be going down is actually an elevation. We're only being elevated. This is wondrous because when we feel like we're down and out, when we feel darkness in our lives, it's actually a greater light that just hasn't been revealed yet. And because it's so bright, it feels or is experienced as though we are blinded and as dark and as lonely and as difficult. But in reality, it's brighter than ever before. That's why we're so blinded by the light and can't even see it, can't even experience it. And that's why we have to believe it and believe in the goodness right here, right now. Something to consider as well in regards to the narrative of being in a chain. If a single piece of the chain is broken, the entire chain is broken by definition. The entire chain is incomplete. It's not like an individual into themselves where, let's say, God forbid, a limb was cut off. Let's say even a finger, God forbid. The person can still function almost at full capacity, right? Almost. But this symbolism of a chain, a single chain across all of history, assumes a deeper purpose and mission. And that if you, yes, you on a personal level are not fulfilling your mission and purpose, are not expressing yourself fully in this world, or at least working towards that, then your link in the chain, in a relative way, hasn't been fully built yet. It's considered broken relative to what it should be. And therefore, we all suffer because we're all connected in an integral way in a collective consciousness, as Kabbalah teaches, as we'll get into as we continue. Bala Sulam continues. In the third question, when we examine ourselves, we feel that we are defective and low. There is little more despicable than we are. Wow, it's harsh language. Hence, the Rebbe Shita is saying, not everyone feels of themselves as so lonely. On the contrary, there are people with great egos and great sense of pride and confidence. But part of our spiritual work is recognizing these lowly and beastly aspects of the ego within, and therefore further identifying with the goodness of our essence. And we'll get into what that essence is and how that's defined. But in short, you are unconditionally valuable, perfectly good, and eternal. We'll get into why. Point is that the recognition of the evil, the recognition of that which brings us out of alignment with the Creator's frequency or being, so to speak, and that the quality of character of the Creator is that of pure giving. And so when we are egoistic, we're in pure reception. And so that's a dissimilarity of form, and therefore there is a sense of death. Because life is to be connected to the life of all lives, and connection by definition is a similarity of form, as Bala Sulam teaches, and we'll get into further. But when you look at humanity, when you look at ourselves, when you also are considerate to just how loud the negative voice in our head can be, I'm sure we're all hopefully working ourselves one way or another, differing degrees, so we can see just how lowly and coarse we can be, just how quick we can be frustrated and aggravated, just how much we can judge ourselves and judge others, how nasty people are capable of being. And so when you look at the nastiness, you look at yourself as being lowly in that moment. But when you're looking at yourself as lowly, you're identifying with the false self because it has nothing to do with you in your deepest essence. So part of this inner work is to recognize this lowliness and yet make a havdalah, make a differentiation, and that this is to be judged as not being part of my true essence identity. This is something separate. Hence the importance of believing the true good within ourselves, that point of goodness, that Nekuda Tova, as Rabbi Nachman teaches. And again, we'll dive more into it as we continue. We're just in the introduction here. Bala Sulam continues, when we examine the Maker who made us, we ought to be superior and perfect. as a perfect creator, ought to make perfect things. So he's giving us a law here. A perfect creator creates perfect creations. So here, on one side, we are wise and loving and so forth. And yet, as I mentioned, we can judge unfavorably. We can get triggered. We can do God knows what. So whether we are looking at our inner workings or our externalities, whether in relationships with others or the relationship with our devotions in regards to Torah and the mitzvot, we can see, with divine assistance, of course, just how deep and big the gap is, the gap of where we would like to be and where the ideal is. The utopian ideal, the altruistic ideal versus the egoistic reality. So Baal Salam says, how could this even be? How could this lowliness even exist if we're drawn from this perfect creator? If you're buying a car from a company in the depths of the Congo that has no reviews, okay. If you're buying a Mercedes, you have a better idea of where it's coming from. So the creator, blessed be he, who is perfect beyond conception, why aren't we perfect like him? Is what Baal Sulam is asking in essence. Amazing questions. Building the vessel here. Question is the vessel. The answer is the light. Before we can really appreciate the light, we have to build the vessel. Baal Salam continues with the fourth question. Logic dictates that God is the great benefactor, and none are greater than him. Why has he created so many creatures who suffer and experience lack during their existence? Good desires to bestow good, and certainly not to generate so much suffering. Because we believe and define the creator as the absolute good, Tova Meitiv, he who does good to the good and to the bad, only doing goodness, which assumes that in his perfection there was no desire to receive, as the desire to receive pleasure for oneself is the defining characteristic of humanity. It is the differentiation point. There is creator, there is creation. There was a connection, there was a oneness experientially, there's a oneness that can be brewed in regards to a relationship. But we never converge and say that creator and creation are literally one. The experience from our end could be one in regards to a relationship, but the creator is beyond all comprehension. Even the concept of infinity, of the Ein Sof, is actually just a thought of creation. Infinity is a thought to the creator's essence. The creator is beyond all conception. It could even be heretical for me to say, but the creator is beyond infinite in the sense that infinity is a concept he created. The brain doesn't go there. Even as I say that out loud, there's like a brain fart. I'm just like, what? What? Creator created infinity? So to say that we are one or have a true direct connection? No. We connect to the light that emanates from the creator. And we'll also get into that. Or in the introduction, I remind us. So, because the creator, in his seeming perfection that we believe in, because there's no way to prove that which is beyond our grasp, because God forbid we would ever put the creator into a form, into some type of material, into some type of being, which is a side note. I digress for a moment, but if you are of the worldview or belief that the creator, that God, and I use God in a colloquial sense, because the word in Hebrew is Hashem that we use colloquially. It literally means the name, but any name is an expression. God is above all name, above all conception of even gender or anything like that. We just say he colloquially in the Kabbalistic tradition because the male is the aspect of giving, because the male gives of his seed biologically, and therefore we say the creator is male. But there are dynamics where there is the divine feminine as well. There are different archetypes and characteristics within the Kabbalah. There are different expressions and experiences of the creator. But the creator in its essence is beyond all. So to put this, which is beyond everything, literally beyond infinite, into a human body, God forbid. So if you believe such a thing, I respect your belief, but it is absolutely inconsistent with the authentic Kabbalistic tradition, the authentic Jewish tradition. It would be absolutely heretical, to be fair, according to our tradition, to put God literally into any human being. Now, it's true that God is within all human beings and that our soul is a spark of the Creator, akin to a chip off the mountain, which we'll also speak about here in this introduction to the Zohar. I am digressing, but I just want to make a point here in regards to this perfect Creator. There was no lack. There was no ego. There was no ability to receive within a vessel of receiving. And yet it is a principle of faith because we can't prove that. We just are positing that logically based on the nature of reality, which he made. Some might argue it's cyclical, but that's where faith comes in. If you want to stick with direct logic, you might get smart. You might make some elevations in your life. But if you want to expand your consciousness to the highest degree, you must sharpen and develop your imuna, your faith, your belief, which is arguably the highest frequency, as it's often connected to the highest sphere of Keter, the crown, because it's above logic and reason, above understanding. It's the supraconscience. So, because the Creator cannot receive, and the desire to receive from oneself alone, which is the ego, is the root of suffering, it cannot be that such a perfect Creator, who is the absolute good, would generate any suffering. And yet there is plenty of suffering. That's what Bala Sulam is allowing us to chew on. Bala Sulam is masterfully building the question here. So he says in the fifth question, how is it possible that from the eternal, which has no beginning nor end, will emanate creatures that come into being, cease to be, and are lowly? We see here a wonderful continuation of the building of this vessel, of this question, in that the Creator is beyond space and time, and yet seemingly has created creations that are timely. How could it be? Let's leave on this cliffhanger. We're building the vessel. In yeshiva, you're not supposed to answer the questions right away. You can sit on a single question or a single debate in the Talmud for a week, let alone weeks or months. It's letting the soup brew or letting the cholent get hot, as we like to say. Let it sit. Let the vessel be built and expand. In the meantime, I'd like to do a short meditation. Rabbi Nachman teaches that our Torah should be equal to our prayer. And I certainly believe that the embodiment, the experience of meditation is akin to prayer. Meditation is a type of prayer. And we should ideally pray within the meditation because we're in a higher state of consciousness. We have a clear and direct channel. And I wanted to meditate on this narrative of being a link in the chain. Rabbi Nachman saying that Torah and Tefillah, our learning and our prayer should be equal. I don't think the meditation we're about to do will be equal to the lesson we had so far, but maybe it will be qualitatively.